Welcome to the Helidon IR project presentation. We are D.Kornilov, it's me. I'm Helidon project lead, and it's T.Langer. He's a Helidon architect. You can see our Twitter IDs there, so feel free to follow us for updates. The agenda for today is I will speak first. This is mainly general overview of Helidon. What is Helidon? What are the messages of Helidon? I'll talk a little bit of Helidon SE and Helidon MP. I'll describe the feature set and this kind of stuff. It's for about 20 minutes. And after that, I'll pass control to Tomasz, and Tomasz will do some kind of live coding. We'll show you the APIs. We'll do some demo, so it will definitely be more interesting. So I'll try to be quick. And at the end, we are planning to have a short Q&A session if we have time. I think that we will have it. So I'm asking to keep your questions to the end of the session. Okay, let's get started. This is the safe harbor statement. This is the legal stuff. Yeah, okay, thank you. This is the legal stuff I have to put there. Basically, it means that what I'm talking about, it's not necessary to be a part of their final product. So don't rely on what I am talking about. Don't think that. Don't say that this guy was saying that this is going to be done and this is not done in the final product. Consider this is kind of overview and just the general session. So what is Helidon? Here you see a one-sentence description of what it is, and it's a set of Java libraries for developing microservices. Two keywords are here. First, Java, so it's Java related, and the second is microservices. So we designed Helidon framework from scratch, especially for microservices. It's quite symbolic that I'm presenting it here in Czech Republic for the first time. This is actually the first presentation of Project Helidon. We are going to present it on Oracle Code 1 next week and at GeeCON next week. But here it's the first big presentation of Helidon. And I said symbolic, and it's because Helidon is actually made in Czech Republic. So some years ago, 2-3 years ago, I started some efforts to make microservices framework at Oracle, and at the end, it became a Helidon project. Here we are. What Helidon is, so I can understand that this is a kind of word which you don't understand, and it's in Greek, it means swallow. And swallow is a type of bird with streamlined body, I'm reading actually from Wikipedia, and long pointed wings, which allow great maneuverability and very efficient flight. So a bit of symbolism here as well. So it's perfect for darting through the clouds. These are the main messages I'm going to deliver. So Helidon is open, it's innovative, it's standards friendly, and it's supported active project. And I will explain each of these bullets in details now. So openness. So we are open source, we are hosted on GitHub, and here you see the link. It's under Oracle organization, and down there is a screenshot, so just to prove that we actually are hosted on GitHub. The important thing here is Apache 2 license, right? So this is very permissive license, and it kind of proves that we are open. So no license restrictions. I'm a little bit jumping over, so I will explain innovation and standards-friendly stuff a little bit later. So I'm jumping to supported active project. So what does it mean? I'm trying to say that we have a lot of things for users. We are trying to be users-friendly. So we have a website at helidon.io with a lot of documentation, with some user guides. Don't expect as many as OpenLiberty has, right? For now, we announced Helidon just a couple of months ago. Don't expect as many as Spring has, but possibly in a year, when I speak here or someone else speak here, we will say that, okay, we have 10 guides there, right? Because we are working continuously on improving our documentation and user guides. We also have a public Slack channel. So here is the address. Just go there if you'd like to talk directly with developers. If you have any questions, just post it there. We are checking it. So trying to provide answers as quick as possible. And of course, contributions are welcome. So just go to our GitHub if you have any bugs, if you have any feedback, just post it in the issues, provide pull requests. We are working on, we are looking at that, and we are trying to give the fast feedback. Okay, now we are coming to innovations and standards-friendly stuff. So on this slide, you see that Java frameworks for microservices fall into a few categories. So you see that from the smaller to the larger, I mean the size of the framework, it's micro frameworks like Javelin, Spark, Micronaut, and it's simple, fun, intentionally small feature set frameworks. The second category, which is bigger than micro framework, is microprofile based framework. Do you know what microprofile is? Can you raise hand? Can you raise hand who know what microprofile is? I know that Mark knows what microprofile is. Okay. Not too many people, but these people are actually potential users of Helidon MP. I will explain microprofile a little bit later when I will talk about Helidon MP. And coming back to the frameworks, the full stack frameworks like Spring Boot and Drop Wizard, basically huge feature set, bigger framework. Where Helidon is here, so we are covering two categories. So we are in micro frameworks and we are in microprofile based frameworks. And these two APIs called Helidon SE and Helidon MP. And here I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. So Helidon SE, it's a simple, functional, lightweight micro framework. So it's in micro frameworks, developed in a modern reactive way. So there is no injection magic, no special runtime required. JDK is used as a runtime. The API is very similar to Express.js. So if you have JavaScript experience, you will find out that our reactive WebServer API is very similar. So learning curve is very smooth. And the second part of Helidon is Helidon MP. And this is Eclipse Microprofile implementation, providing development experience familiar to Java EE, Jakarta EE. So this is declarative style. And Java EE components such as CDI, JAX-RS, and JSON-P are part of that. So two flavors of Helidon, slightly different development experience. Innovation is in Helidon SE, and standards, I would say specification, because microprofile is not really a standard, it's a specification, It may become a standard in future when it joins Jakarta EE. So this is where we support standards, we are standards friendly. So what else I can say, that where are some Jakarta EE efforts are going on, and I have a t-shirt Jakarta EE. So, this is not, I'm just doing that, right? I'm showing you the t-shirt. So when Jakarta EE come out with some kind of a micro standard, microprofile based standard, we will support it in Helidon. This is how Helidon architecture looks like. So you see that everything is based on Helidon SE, this is the blue part of that, and it's built on top of Netty. And the main components of Helidon SE are web server, config, and security. I'll talk a little bit about this later, and Tomasz will explain it in greater details. Helidon MP, its microprofile implementation, is built on top of SE. And here in orange, there are Java EE components you're familiar with, JAX, RS, CDI, and JSONP. We also have this red cloud integrations layer. This is optional. It contains some cloud-friendly integration stuff like CDI-based data source injection and other stuff. So, Helidon MP in details. As I said, 3 components: a reactive web server, configuration, and security. Reactive web server provides simple functional routing model with reactive flow API. So this is, as I was saying already, similar to Express.js in JavaScript. It's built on Netty, it supports open tracing and metrics, and it also can be used to serve static content. Configuration. We have 2 configurations actually for Helidon SE and for Helidon MP. I'm talking about Helidon SE configuration. Flexible typed config model. We support multiple data sources. We support sources layering. We support hierarchical model. It means that your configuration is actually a tree, like we support YAML files. We support dynamic updates, means that event is erased, then configuration is updated, and it's extensible. And security is very important these days, so basic things like authentication, authorization, outbound security auditing is supported. It's also extensible. Tomasz will demonstrate security, how it works in real. Here is a code sample of Helidon SE. So basically this sample serves the GET request on hello path and it returns hello world. So you see that this is basically builder-based APIs with functional style programming, and this is very simple. So create routing, and after that you create a web server, pass in routing, there you start it. Now let's jump into Helidon MP. So we support Microprofile version 1.1. We almost support 1.2. One missing bit is JWT authentication. This is why I marked it a little bit more green here. So green are Microprofile components. So we support config, metrics, health check, fault tolerance, and almost, this is not done yet, JWT authentication. Again, I will just say that if you don't know what Microprofile is, I see that many don't know, just go to microprofile.io and read more about these components. And in orange, JAX RS CDI JSON processing, this is what it's required by Microprofile, by the way, and we support it in Helidon MP as well. The same sample code I demonstrated for Helidon SE in MP. So see here, you see familiar annotations. So this is basically JAX RS things. So I don't know what to say. It's a bit different code experience, more familiar code development experience. So you create your resources, you start with server like that. Okay, now about the plans. We just started. Helidon was launched a couple of months ago, and we have a lot of plans for next year. So first of all, we are planning to support the next version of Microprofile. Microprofile 2 is already there. We are almost supporting 1.2, right? So we have a lot of work to do. We're planning to support HTTP 2 and reactive HTTP client. We are planning tighter integration with JDK. So for instance, we are planning to use HTTP client from JDK 11. We can already have it, but we need a little bit tune it. Project Starter, this is their website, this is UI for Helidon project generation. Then you can select features you want, and the project will be automatically generated for you with only features you selected, so nothing else. We already started work on integrating with GraalVM, and the results are very impressive. So it works faster, it starts faster, it can serve more requests. We are planning to deliver the solid integration with GraalVM sometimes next year. And here are more things to, like what we are thinking about, in this direction we are thinking about. So it's mainly reactive storage, NoSQL, ADBC, open API support, not only the microprofile way, we have other thoughts in our heads, and eventing. And the last slide is basically links. This is our website, Twitter, so subscribe to us, we are posting updates there. GitHub repository and our Slack channel. I will post these slides after my talk to Twitter and to SlideShare possibly, so you'll be able to download and see all these links. Okay, as I promised, 20 minutes, and it's time for Tomasz and some not so boring code demonstrations. Thank you.
We have the same background, it's good. All right. I'll first explain what I'm going to do, and then I'll hopefully do it. So first part, I want to show how simple it is to start a web server and create a road. And second part is to showcase our microservices. So I will have a service written in our Helidon Microprofile and a service written with Helidon SE. And I have a Docker running a Zipkin tracing, so we can see also the tracing support of our solution. There's a list of things that are used in each of the services. What I probably should point out is the security part. So for our MP service, it will be protected with basic authentication because it does not depend on external resources. And I'm kind of afraid on conferences to connect to Google, for example. And for outbound security, it's actually propagating the basic authentication and using HTTP signatures. Obviously, the Helidon SE service is accepting this security and asserting the user and service. By the way, if you want the, I have to move away so we can see the link. Maybe not, okay. That's actually the project that I will be demonstrating is available on my GitHub. So if you want to, you can download it and play around with it. So let's go to code. So first thing, I will just create a new Java class. Let's call it this way. I don't want to edit. And I will create our web server. So web server, as Dimitri showed, has some useful methods for creating a new instance. So what I want to do, I will just create an instance with router. I will eventually start it, and when it's started, I want to do something with the result. So the start actually returns a completion stage that provides the web server instance afterwards. So what I want to know is where it started, because by default, web server will choose an open port. So let's see where it is. So there is a useful method port, and I will create a routing on /grid. So now we need to finish the routing. So how to do that? You can see that IntelliJ is clever enough to know which class is supported. So I want to create a routing. And here, as we have seen before, I just want to say that when a get is called on /grid, I want to do something. So I prefer to use a method rather than an inlined stuff. So let's do it this way. I will create my method hello with a server request and server response. It's a hello world, so we just return server response dot send. What is interesting here, you can see that there are three methods. Send method will just close the response and send it back. Send with a type will write an object into the entity and send it. Or you can use publisher. This is actually a copy of the flow publisher from Java 9. So if you want to do a full reactive writing, you can do that as well. I will just send a string. String support is out of the box. So if you put a string in, it will be written to output. You don't need anything else. So we will just say hello world here. Oh, let's say hello GeeCON when we are here. Okay. This should work. Let's see. So my server was started, and hopefully when I click on greet, it should open my browser, which is probably open in another screen. So let's switch there. Okay, this full screen stuff is not working as expected, because I do have another window open somewhere, so let's just do it manually. When things don't work, we help them. HTT I need to write, okay. Okay, very simple, returns a nice hello GeeCON. This is the first part of Helidon SE. That's the main part. You can create roads, play around with them. The second part is configuration. So I have my application YAML file. It's kind of complicated. Let's only focus on the first part. So there is an YAML saying that I have app.greeting, which says hello. So I will just change it to, we are in Czech Republic, so let's change it to Ahoy. Presentation mode is so much fun. Normal shortcuts don't work. So here, I will do a dirty thing, so I will just create a config instance for each request. Don't do this at home. So, create. There is a small magic hidden behind this. If you have YAML supported by config, it will pick up a file called application.yaml from your class path. Obviously, you can configure it. I will show that later. So I have now config, and I want to use it to print my response. So I will say config.get. I will give it the key, which was it message? Let's hope so. Greeting. Thank you very much. I want string, which is actually just value, and then I say or else, so we have a default, so it doesn't fail. Oh, disappeared off screen. So I'm just traversing the tree of the configuration. You could do exactly the same thing by doing config.get app.get greeting. Because our configuration is a tree structure, the dots serve as the tree separator, so you can use both approaches. Now, when I run it again, oh, port is changed, 53137. So we can see that it picked up our configuration. So this is like the very simplistic example of web server and configuration. I will switch to the full example for security because that requires more configuration, and it's kind of too hard to do that right now because I decided to do quite a lot with security. So I will go to our example that I prepared in advance. This is the main method that I have prepared. So what I do in this example, I create a configuration. This is actually a configuration that uses fallback file, so you can override values, for example, in your development environment or in your production environment. After that, I create routing. I set up tracing, so we can talk to Zipkin. I set up metrics, so we can see some metric support. I set up my security, and then I start the server. So configuration, the other configuration. Here you can see, as Dimitri mentioned, the stacking of sources. So in my case, first I want to use my dev conference-se.yaml. After that, maybe a production YAML file, and as the last one is the application.yaml from the class path. This way you can override, and maybe even in this case, because I have polling strategy here, I can change in runtime the values of the configuration. After that, I set up my server. The server is actually, I'm trying to show also that we have builder support and configuration support. So in this case, I'm just building it by hand. It's listening on localhost and port 8080. We could do exactly the same thing by using configuration. So that's the commented outline if you want to reload your configuration from the config file. After that, we set up tracing. So tracing is actually, I have it. Why don't I see the unfold button here? Oh, come on. Presentation mode, yay. Anybody knows how to do that? I don't want to exit presentation mode because that would create, there we go. So I have my Zipkin host in the configuration. If it's present, I create a global tracer, which will be our Zipkin tracer. We are using Open Tracing API for tracing, which luckily for us is consistent with what Microprofile tracing is doing. So once we implement the Microprofile tracing, it should be the same APIs. Setup metrics. Metrics support is also using the Microprofile approach. So first, we need to create the registry. Second, we need to expose the metrics over network. So here I am creating my endpoint. For that, we have actually a helper class that will register metrics on /metrics. There is a builder, you can customize all of this. Security. When you do configuration, it's just the first 2 lines. So you say create security from configuration, and register web security for integration with web server. If you do it by hand, it's kind of longer, and I still hit quite a lot of stuff in the methods because obviously for HTTP signatures, you need to define the key that will be used to sign the message. For basic authentication, you need to define your usernames and passwords. So that's hidden. I will not go into detail here, but I will show it eventually in the config. Then I add routing. And here, I just say, I want to do JSON, and I want to register a service on /greet. And this service is the implementation of my REST service, finally, after setting up all the environment. And then we just start server. So the greet service is creating some counters for the metrics, and then creates the routing. So here we can see that for this service, we want to route greet / for default message /name, for a customized message, and you can also update the greeting if you use a put method. For example, default message, I'm using security to obtain the current user. I send the response with the username, and I increase my counter. So this part is obtaining security context from the web server. inserted by integration with security. If there is no security, it will just return the word world. So now I will run this service. So we should have a server started on port 8080. If I find my main method, here we go. Run. So my nicely prepared Chrome window is hidden somewhere else, so I have to type it again. So it's port 8080, and we have greet. This is the default, so that's just hello world. If I do greet/jack, which is my secured endpoint, maybe I should show it in a here, so we can see that it actually requires authentication. Nice password. Why is it so complicated? Okay, so we can see that you have written jack in the line, and then security is correct. Now I can show the endpoints that are automagically created, let's say. So there is an endpoint for metrics. This is the list of metrics that are available on our server when you integrate with metrics. You can see application metrics. These are the ones specified by your application. So we can see that I have called my greet message twice and my default greeting once. There are some vendor metrics. There are some base metrics. This is actually part of the Microprofile specification for metrics. So this is the application based on Helidon SE. I will just show quickly the configuration of security. So here we can see that I have my HTTP signatures defined. I configure which headers should be signed. And when I get an inbound request, how to validate the signature. In this case, I'm just using an HMAC secret. As you can see, that's a bad idea to use this in the configuration. For basic authentication also, I have clear text passwords in here just for the sake of this presentation. Now, if I go to my Microprofile example, I tried to show that we can do it better, that you don't need to do these things in clear text. So for example here, when I have configuration of the outbound security, my secret is actually encrypted. So we also support encryption of secrets in configuration, so you don't expose them accidentally to others. So this is just using a symmetric encryption, and you provide a password when you run the service, either through environment variable or through system property. So this is the other part, and it doesn't work. You cannot close a window. So I will just go there and find my main method. And the main method here is a bit shorter, because start server is server.create.start. Helidon Microprofile, because it's using CDI, will do some magic. So here is the part where we actually invoke magic and we scan annotated classes and add them to our server. So if a class is annotated as application scope and it's a JAX-RS application, it will be added to our server, and you will be able to see it. So this is the only line you need to call when you start a Microprofile server and you have an application available. So my application here, as you can see, it's application scoped, so it gets picked up. It's providing a single JAX-RS resource, and the JAX-RS resource has the methods that we basically did in our SE example, only using JAX-RS. The only difference here is that security, let me find a secured one. No, it's on the class. Come on, here we go. So it's authenticated, which gives a hint to my security provider that it should invoke authentication on this resource. There is also roles allowed. So for example, the update greeting only is allowed when you are in a role admin. For metrics, you can see that here we can use annotations. We have CDI, we have the full Microprofile specification. So just by annotating it as timed, there will be a new timer created that will be measuring this method. count it. I'm trying to do exactly the same thing I did in the SE. So I create a counter which is explicitly named. Monotonic means that it should increase continuously. If you don't do it, it will only count the numbers of methods that are invoked right now. It's funny to find out that small trick in the specification. It was returning zeros all the time. Okay, so again, I'm doing the same thing. I collect the security information and I return it. This time, the whole request is secured. One thing I created here to test the outbound security is this method. So this method is actually saying that when a request comes in, I use a client. So I have here a JAX-RS client web target annotated with my annotation that is injecting security and tracing. So we connect the traces together. The name is the path that we are invoking. And then I configure some properties that are needed for propagating security, propagating tracing. And then I just get the JSON back. So this is actually calling the SE service. So I will start it as well. This should run on port 8081. We can see that actually here we are using Microprofile properties for configuring the server. So here we can see that up greeting is hello and server port is 8081. So I also show the combination here of Microprofile configuration and of Helidon configuration in the same application. Okay, so our server is started. So now when I do 8081, metrics are running, that's good. So I have here the outbound metrics. So this actually invoked the outbound service and called our SE service. The great thing is, when I go to GeeCON, what is the default port? Who remembers the default port for GeeCON? Nobody? Do I have to really find my other Chrome window? No, I can't. I think it's 47 something. Let's just type GeeCON. Ah, 9411, great. So here is our GeeCON traces. I will put newest first so we know the last request. And here we can see that there is a trace that is covering the two services that we have created. If I go inside of this trace, we can use that Helidon MP was invoked. For example, what we can see here is authentication trace and authentication found user jack. When we do the identity propagation, so here we switch from Helidon MP to Helidon SE. There is a Jersey outbound call. There is also security, and what we can see here is that there is security jack from the basic authentication, but there is also the service authenticated as the Microprofile service. This is coming from the signatures. So signature was created, processed, and correctly asserted. You can actually use both of this information in your program. Both are accessible through security context. So a nice trace for the whole application. And again, as I said before, okay, let me show the presentation once more. Where is the other screen? Come on. No, I cannot show the presentation. It's hidden. So we will just go to the endpoints that are created. So 8081, our Microprofile server. We have the greeting endpoint. We have obviously the metrics endpoint. Here are all the application metrics that are annotated on the methods. What is kind of nice with Microprofile spec, you can actually use a single metric, append it to the line, and you can see the information there. What we also have here is health checks, which I included as well. There are some out-of-the-box health checks that are returned. So if you just include health with your Microprofile server, you will get this information. Okay, so we can see that there is the whole server is up, and these checks were provided. So we check for deadlocks in the JVM, we check for heap memory, we check for heap space available, and so on. So these are like out-of-the-box stuff that you get for free. You can add your own health checks. Again, Microprofile specification is the right place to look, how to add custom health checks. So I think that I have done all of these. What you can also see that we are actually not using the path to return the security information. It's really from security. So when I go back to my server, to my source code, we have seen that all this worked as expected. I think that I have gone through all the parts that we wanted. So I think it's some good time to see if you have some questions or something that you want to see in the source code. JSON binding is supported in Microprofile because Jersey supports it. So you can use whatever Jersey supports, and JSON binding is one part of it. Well, we support it right now. So basically, that's the advantage that we use Jersey for our Microprofile implementation, because it has quite a lot of media types supported already. So in Helidon SE, we right now support JSON-P, JSON processing. In Helidon Microprofile, we support everything that Jersey supports.
Sorry, maybe I will give you the microphone so everybody could hear the question.
I can repeat it. It's fine. Repeat the question.
Yeah, you can.
I can repeat the question when they ask it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Could you look something like correlation ID? For example, if you have few microservices which start again transaction or some action, you can log ID for observe how the message goes to some services and what code stashed or in the history.
Okay, so the question was if we do some basically tracing, sending over some identification of the request that is going through the microservices. That's basically what I showed with the Zipkin traces. So if you correctly configure your client and send over the tracing headers, Zipkin will create this trace for you, as we have seen in the output. So is that what you meant? Because that connects all the services. If you have 10 microservices, you should see them all in the tracing. Okay, I will show it again in Zipkin. So here you can see that we have Helidon MP. Starting with an HTTP request, we went through reading the content, invoked security, used Jersey client call, then there is HTTP request coming into Helidon SE, and again security, authentication, writing the response. You can add your own spans into the tracing, so the traces are available to an application, and the application can add additional traces. So, for example, if you have a call to an external server or call to a database and you want to see it in your trace, you can simply say, I want to create a new span, configure the log messages, and call it. This is supported both in Helidon SE and in MP, and in the future, when we have MP Microprofile tracing, you will be able to just annotate a method, a resource method, and it will be automatically traced. So this is supported.
This Zipkin stuff, is it per microservice or is it aggregated for all microservices running on a certain host?
Well, Zipkin is just one implementation of the tracing aggregator. You can use others, for example, Jaeger. It really depends on how you configure it. So normally what you do is you have a single Zipkin instance for the microservices that are connected together, so you can see the trace across all of them. It's designed for that, so you should have a Zipkin host, and your microservices are feeding the traces into that Zipkin host. And that's actually, Zipkin is absolutely out of our scope. We only use it to show that we can do tracing. It's not really something that we implement or want to play around with. We just use the API that they provide. We use the open tracing API, and we are going to use the Microprofile API. But that's really about, we do tracing. Zipkin is just one implementation of that. Anybody else? Okay, so as you have seen, there are links to our main repository. I have shown the link to the repository of this example that I have shown. You can play around with it and have fun with Project Helidon.